There's one man that I think really loves his job. No, I don't think he really loves his job. I know he loves it. Because he has the singular mandate to sell Ghana in a way that nobody has. He has a mandate to sell Ghana's agriculture, IT, to encourage oil and gas, to make mining and transport infrastructure look attractive. And I dare say he has done an extraordinary job, not just on the continent, but around the world. A few weeks ago, he was in my beautiful country of Canada, well, my other beautiful country of Canada, and I did have friends sending me messages to say, this guy really sure does love Ghana. But Honorable Minister, you've said something very important. Ghana is what it is for us. It made us. It makes us. And so it's important for us to make it. And this man surely does make Ghana look good. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow to the stage with a round of applause the CEO of Ghana Investment Promotion Center, the Honorable Yofi Grant.
Good morning to you all. She said many things, but I can tell you I'm just your humble servant. The Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry, my good friend, Michael Murphy. Yeah, I call him Michael. I don't know whether it's his name or not, but it is my very good father, Honorable Hackman Oswajiman, my very good friend Kylie, who is in charge of the IFC in a number of countries in Africa, and the other very distinguished ladies and gentlemen whose first names I don't know. I think you're all very welcome. Indeed, as the Honorable Minister said, these are very trying times. Very, very trying times. But it has put the world in a certain mood, which for me is very interesting. I mean, who ever dreamt that the world would be brought to its knees in 2020 with the emergence of the COVID pandemic? Nobody predicted it, although it had been there. Now we're now finding out that as early as 2016, there were all sorts of researches on, human vectors or viruses that came from animals. But nobody expected that we would have a disease that would bring the world to its knees. And then just when we're all sort of recovering, then a conflict happened, which really has shaken the pot of global relationships and made us now think harder than we did before as to how we should proceed. And I guess that's the core of today's conversation of building resilience. What we ought to do, what we need to do. And there are quite a number of young people here, but we can also see seasoned people who have gone through the many channels of business with all their collective experience. Now, the capacity to adjust to change and shocks that pose a threat to a business stability is what we know as business resilience. And the strong points of resilience include the capacity to first recognize that there is a problem or there's a risk, then to avoid that risk, and then to manage the disruptive challenges in a sustainable way. And in today's buzzwords, sustainability is the key. And this is the lesson we've learned from the COVID pandemic and the war. How do we sustain our businesses and our lives? The pandemic's shockwave had a significant impact on Ghana's economy and enterprise, and in fact, the whole world. The UNCTAD report in 2020, by the end of 2020, predicted that global foreign direct investor flows would decrease by 42%. When I first said it, the first thing I said was, ouch. The biggest, victim of that, I wouldn't say victim, but the biggest, place who will be affected will be Africa. Because on a net-net basis, Africa is a big recipient of foreign direct investment in its development agenda. But some interesting things happened. I remember that when the COVID pandemic broke out and at the height of its, fear, some of the predictions were that, Africa, with its low level of health interventions, we're going to see people dying on the streets. And it's a calamity waiting to happen. But strangely enough, 2020 going on, we didn't see those bodies on the streets. And Africa offered some resilience to the pandemic. And in fact, Ghana, to today, has been noted as one of those countries that seem to have had a strong system of managing the virus that sort of made us a shining example to the world. And if you look at it today, I mean, Ghana's mortality rate was less than 1%, 0.6%. And we had a very high recovery rate. And scientists attribute it to all sorts of things, many things that they believe are not even due to our patterns. But the fact that early on we identified and we started doing, quarantines and testing people. Ghana was one of the first countries to start testing people at the airport. Commendable. But we were building resilience in a certain sense. But I said it was very interesting because in 2020, much against what the continent thought, FDI to Africa rather grew by some 86%, according to the UNCTAD investment report. And everybody said, wow, yeah, that's it. But then if you look at the areas in which the foreign direct investment was, most of them were in the extractives and not in real value addition. So it wasn't a remarkable change from what had been in the past. And despite that increase, foreign direct investment to the continent was still less than 5% of global flows. So it just meant that maybe there was something else we had to do. There was another signaling that we had to do. And even Ghana, which prior to the pandemic had shown a strong growing economy to one of the fastest growing economies in the world, an average of 7% in the 3 years preceding the pandemic. And even during the pandemic, we were one of the few countries that did not go into recession. Many of the larger, stronger, more robust economies went into recession. Ghana's economy grew by 0.72%. It was still a way mark away from what we had projected in the absence of COVID, but we still grew positively. And even post the pandemic highlight in 2021, when still countries were grappling with the ravages and the severe disruptions that it had caused to supply chains and trade, the Ghanaian economy still showed some growth, and still one of the highest in the world at the time. In 2020, our GDP growth rate was 5.4%. Even this year, with all the other problems that have risen, all the major problems that we've seen, our currency, inflation, interest rates, in the first quarter of this year, the economy grew by 3.3%. In the second quarter, it surged a little bit forward at 4.3%. So I think in there, maybe God has given us a spirit of resilience against all odds to persevere and do some things that would change our country and change the continent and change the world. I mean, Ghana's economy was ranked by the World Bank as having one of the fastest growth in Africa prior to the pandemic. And as a matter of fact, I said the average GDP growth was 7%. And according to results from the COVID-19 Business Tracker Survey conducted by the GSS, the Ghana Statistical Service, in collaboration with the UNDP and the World Bank, about 770,000 workers, that's 25% or 26% of our workforce, had their wages reduced, and about 42,000 employees were laid off during the country's COVID-19 partial lockdown. The pandemic also led to a reduction in working hours for close to almost 700,000 workers. And government had to spend considerable amounts of money saving lives and livelihoods. And I'm sure you all remember some of the things that happened, like people were getting free food, they were getting free water, free electricity. And, government had to spend a significant amount of money to ensure that we survived and we went on and we lived. And so, as the first speaker said, we must thank God that we are here today. And as I always tell my children, the future is almost always more important than the past. But to make that transition from the current situation and from the past to the future is a challenge that every person must grapple with. And it will take the resilience and ingenuity of the private sector, largely comprising small and medium enterprises, to accentuate the economic growth and create sustainable jobs. Without a doubt, government sets the environment, government sets the ambient structures, and the private sector as a main actor then engages and does that. And so at this time in our lives, there's not been a better time in our lives, in my honest, humble opinion, for us to be more aggressive about the way we do things, for us to imbibe a spirit of positivity despite all the problems that we have, to make that transition from the present to the future. Because if we lose hope and we always struggle with the negative, our energies will be lost in that process. If we stay positive and engineer and structure ways in which we confront those challenges, we are going to see a movement forward. SMEs contribute to the economic growth of Ghana, no doubt. And if you look at the structure of our economy, it's estimated that approximately 90% of the companies we have in Ghana are SMEs, and they contribute about 85% of the total employment pot in the manufacturing space. Just before I came to sit down, we had a good interview with Asasi, and I was talking about the composite challenges that the young entrepreneur faces. And I was talking about how, even as a country and as a community, we haven't inculcated in them that spirit of resilience and robustness to confront issues. And as a sidetrack, I'll tell you a little story where this friend of mine, very wealthy chap in Ghana, very wealthy chap, and had a very smart son. He went to the best schools, went to the US Ivy League schools, and met some of the richest people and some of the most, endowed people. And he came back to Ghana, and he wanted to go out. And I was there in the home, and he wanted to go out, and he came to ask his dad, "Oh, Dad, can I use one of your cars?" And the dad had, "Name it." And the dad said, "No. Go and take a trotro." You know trotro. For those who are not Ghanaian, the trotro is a small minibuses who zip around the country dangerously, but safely almost all the time. And told him to go and take a trotro. And the boy said, "But you have all these cars sitting down. Why do I need to go on the road and struggle and take the trotro?" The father said, "I want you to go and take it so you learn how hard it is to make life." I looked at the two of them, and I said, "Well, does he have a point? Does he not have a point?" And I said, "No, the father doesn't have a point." So I told the father, please, let him take the car. So reluctantly, he said, "Okay, you take the car." But he was upset that I actually intervened. And he said, "You see, you are the people who spoil the children. You're not letting them see the realities in life." And I told him, "You know what? Stop this nonsense. This is your son's reality. It's not your reality. He's been to the best schools. He's extremely smart, very intelligent, and he's in a status where, because you have so much money, unless he's extremely stupid in accordance with his intelligence, he will never be poor. Rather, you should be encouraging him to use what he knows to create more opportunity for others, but not stopping him. But then what it provoked in me was I went back home and I was thinking, hey, have I spoiled my children? But this is the reality we face today. What options do we leave with the young people? How do we prepare them for an emerging future? And in the conversation I had with Mr. Enshrined, I said that perhaps we should go back to the drawing board. Our tertiary institutions should start teaching them life skills which they can apply when they come out of school, and create their own businesses and move on. And instructively and surprisingly, a lot of the young people today are interested in building new businesses. The sad bit about it is when you see any new business coming out, the chances is that it's by a young person from the diaspora. How do we transmit that same spirit of a can-do spirit, ability in our young people coming from our public schools and coming from every nook and cranny of this country that you can do it? But you have to learn the processes of doing it. One of the things that we've done, and I use myself as an example, till I came out of secondary school and perhaps to university, the idea of doing something for myself never occurred to me. I just assumed that it will work out. I'll come out, I'll get a job. I didn't even have a clue what I wanted to do in life. To be honest with you, when I went to university, I didn't have a clue about if I graduated, what I would do. In fact, I kept going on because I was passing the exams. And I sat back and said, so what if I had failed once or twice? What would that have done to me? Would I have been condemned to the people who hopelessly, roam the streets looking to eke out a life from whatever comes to them? Or would I have been prepared by the system to say that if A didn't work, there's B, there's C, there's D? And all those are components of the resilience that we should be talking about today. But despite all these hardships, though, I must say that the government of Ghana continues to administer policies and programs to better equip businesses to enable a cohesive response by integrating core resilient competencies such as business continuity, disaster recovery, incident management, fiscal security, threat intelligence, and emergency response. And today, government is encouraging small, large businesses in the private sector to definitely go into technology, because technology will increase efficiencies, and it will also reduce significantly the canker that we all talk about, the agency cost of doing business. And I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. As for machine doesn't negotiate money, it just collects. So even the use of technology would enable us control and perhaps have a better hang on corruption than has been there. And various flagship programs have been implemented by government to boost private-public partnerships, ensure the ease of doing business to investors and indigents, and also to ensure a conducive, resilient, and vibrant economy. I mean, anytime GIPC goes out now, we go with some of the agencies and we try as much as possible to encourage private entrepreneurs to go with us so that they meet the investors firsthand or get new ideas as to how they can come back and transform the economy. I'm sure you see something on the board that says the African opportunity. I'll just talk about a few things and then roll out into why this is very important. So if you indulge me with some 5 more minutes. Some of the current policies that we have, and please note, this is not about politics, it's about nation building. Some of the policies that recently we've had as a country are purely transformational. And what many people have not understood is there's a whole matrix of transformation that has very many components that you can only address by policy. And for me, the most important, only because it builds a new cadre of young, better-heeled, better-prepared Ghanaian working class, is the free senior high school program. Can you imagine that before this program, every year, 100,000 plus kids were thrown off the education ladder, either because they couldn't pay to go to senior high school, or they failed and there was no remedials for them to do, and so just dropped off education at the age of 13, 14. And every year this was happening and increasing in numbers. You can't transform an economy when you had a human capital growth like that. At least what the free SHS has done is that in the very near future, the minimum education of the average Ghanaian will be high school education. People who come out of school at the ages of 17 and 18, better healed, better prepared for life, and with a mind that enables them to start thinking of the future. I mean, I can tell you when I was 13, 14, my future did not include anything about my work, my career, etc., etc. My future was, where was the next meal coming from? And I'm sure it's the same for most of you, if you be honest with yourselves. And this is what we seem condemned to. But today, we have a policy that is going to ensure that most of us who leave school at the age of 17, 18, 19, perhaps now being confronted by the life cycles of life and changing and becoming more aggressive about our future. And in that program, we also need to build the resilience of people. When you come out at 17, 18, you have more natural resilience to things that happen to you than when you are 13, 14, without a doubt. So that initiative in itself is extremely transformational. But it was done with the mind that we would transition our economy from one that was predicated on the export of raw materials and resources to one that had value addition, productivity, because it was essential. We've had an economy that we're exporting our gold, our diamonds, our timber, etc., etc. It hasn't changed the fortunes of this country remarkably. But when we start producing value-added goods and exporting, it does two things. It takes us further up the value chain for more value of what we do, and also, if we had done this 30, 40 years back, the problem we have with our currency today perhaps may not have happened, because we'll be exporting much, 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 much more than we import. The fact that we are still importing basic things like our food, like our clothes, even our cars, means that we'll always have this problem of the cedi chasing the dollar. But if we were producing our own clothes, we're producing our own food and exporting some, we would have a lot more dollars coming in and there will be no pressure on our cedi. Isn't that true? Isn't that true? It is, without a doubt. So it's important that we send that. And the primary tool that government has used to do that is the one district, one factory policy, where it says that at least every district out of our 361 districts should have a value additional manufacturing entity based on the raw materials and resources around that area. Can you imagine what that would do? The opportunities to create in every district. Because for every one factory that is built, you need marketing people, you need haulage people, you need labor, you need all sorts of things. You even need people to cook for the factory workers or whatever it is. It started with one district, one factory. That is not the limit. It should be one district, 10 factories, one district, 20 factories, one district, 30 factories. So whilst you are embarking on an education program to ensure that you have better heeled and better skilled young people coming out, it's also important that when they come out, with that in mind, they will get the opportunity to get higher paying jobs, better capacity, and be able to compete, mano a mano in the world. But that's not all. Because recognizing once again, and I'm building you the architecture of the transformation that is required in this country. First, educate the people, get them what to do. But then you also look back and say, oh, wow, we are a major agricultural nation. 60% of our land mass is agricultural land. So you need to pay attention to that. And so there was the planting for food and jobs, because that, in the primary economy of ours, employed almost 55% of our people, somewhere along the value chain. So you have to pay attention to that. So this, again, came up and helped people get jobs and go back. And through that, we've seen ourselves migrate gradually from a net importer of food to a net exporter, even of some of our cash crops, maize, plantains that before we were importing. Now, sometimes we export. But that is not all, because in that agricultural value chain, you need infrastructure. You need to build more warehouses, you need to build transport, you need to build railways. So government's plan was that let's find the money and build 4,007 kilometers of new railway lines, such that we can connect everywhere in the country. Let's find money to do 11,000 kilometers of roads, so we can connect all over the country. Brilliant, but all that cannot happen at one time, because we are not generating enough money. So we either have to get investors in, which makes my job harder, because every country in this world is competing for investment. I mean, I was in China sometime, and I met the Chinese agency that is like mine. We had great stuff. We had an MOU and all that. And then quite recently, we went to the annual investors meeting in Dubai, which is really the collection of almost all the big investors there. And whose pavilion was the biggest? China. Even though they are a net, provider of capital to the world, they are also looking for investment. Yes, the U.S. is looking for investors. Between the U.S. and China, they are the two biggest, recipients of foreign direct investment. The UAE is looking for investment. Saudi Arabia is looking for investments. Ghana is also looking for investments. And you have to compete with all these countries. So you have to put your best foot forward. But I guess that today, the reason why GIPC is chalking some successes is that the story about our future from the combination of all these policies give confidence that at least this is a country that seems to be defining where it's going. Never mind the problems we have today. I've just come up from a trip that took me to 3 countries. And to be honest with you, when I got back to Ghana, I had a little bit of a sense of relief. We are not a major economy. We are not a large-sized economy. But some of the problems they are facing there, we're not facing there. I passed through Paris, the petrol queues as long as 5 kilometers. I said, what? Paris. The UK is looking at having their own version of Dumso. I said, hey, there we there. You know, I was in Germany, problems. A major asset manager was telling me how much money is lost because of, interest rates and inflation shifts. The US is still grappling with inflation because they've had to do a 3rd time raise of their rates. And you know what happens? Anytime the US increases interest rates, the value of the dollar strengthens against any other currency. So anytime they raise their dollar rates, our cedi will depreciate again. But if we were exporting and getting more dollars than cedis, when they raise the dollar of the rate, it benefits us. And so that is the matrix of and the architecture of transformation that we have built, and I think government is building. But beyond that too is digitalization of the Ghanaian economy to bring about efficiency and to bring about a removal of what I keep saying, the agency bit. We have the paperless port system, the introduction of the digital property addressing system where every 5 by 5 meters squared of Ghana has a digital address. So we know who you are, we know we can find you because you have a national ID card. Then of course, perhaps the most innovative is the financial inclusion that comes from mobile payments interoperability. And Ghana is one of those countries that has pioneered this very well. But beyond that, to the Ministry of Trade and Industry has a 10-point industrialization policy where they're going to make Ghana the hub for certain economies like pharmaceuticals, like agro-processing, like technology, like the automotive industry. And it may surprise you that we see the investors coming. They are coming quietly. And I keep saying that it's good to have the foreign investors come in. But we also need to encourage Ghanaians to invest in some of these areas. Partner with foreign direct investors. Build capacity within ourselves so we can have a bit of the resilience they also bring to us. And for us at GIPC, the AFCFTA could never have been a much better opportunity for us than anybody else in this Africa of today. It creates a real market opportunity for Africa. A continent of 1.4 billion people, and as the minister said, a combined GDP currently of 3.4 trillion. By 2050, Africa will be 1/4 of the world's population. Every 4th person in the world will be African. Now it has it bids well for 2 very good things. One, that's a consumer market waiting to happen. So if you're on the continent, you're doing business on the continent, and you can export within the continent tariff-free, it's like a new world of business. But not just that, it could also potentially supply the world's labor pool. And so that's why education and training is essential for us. And that is why government is also looking at upgrading the technical schools, because we all can't go to universities, get a degree, and go and sit in the office. Is that a sign that I'm talking too much? We all can't, go to universities, get a degree, and go and sit in offices. We must produce people who can do things, make things. I think at this point, I would just move on to this presentation. And can we go to the next slide? It's just 3 minutes. And I started by quoting an old proverb that like the hardy baobab tree native to the African savanna, the African continent is resilient. Despite our challenges in the past and even now, The continent is ready to take her destiny into her own hands. And Ghana exemplifies this perfectly. We've built the policy framework, and we've built the people, we are building the people, we've built the activities, and we engage. Why is Africa so important now than ever, even after the formation of the AFCFTA? The continent is resource rich. This is the richest part of God's real estate, Africa. And Ghana is a microcosmic example of the African continent. Ghana is resource rich. We have gold, we have diamond, we have timber, we have manganese, we have oil and gas, we have bauxite, we have iron ore, we have feldspar, we have limestone. We have almost every resource that we require to be successful. And we have land. Just like the African continent, 60% of our land mass is agricultural. This just gives you a sneak preview of the wealth of the continent. 90% of the world's chromium and platinum comes from Africa. 90% of the world's cobalt comes from Africa. 65% of the world's manganese comes from Africa. Over 50% of the world's gold is from Africa. Indeed, there are many, many more, not to mention lithium, not to mention coltan. 75% of the world's coltan is from Africa. Now, for every one of you here today who has a mobile phone, you have a bit of Africa with you, because the chromium and the coltan and the lithium that may be in your mobile phone was from Africa. But you're not even aware of it. Ghana has recently joined the league of those who may well have very significant lithium resources. But you know why lithium is important? Because lithium, as they say, is the gold of the future. It is required for Industry 4.0. All the e-mobility and all the batteries, etc., that we require for mobile phones, for cars, for plants, etc., use lithium and coltan. So that's a significant opportunity. 22 countries produce petrol and coal. 12% have industrial minerals. 13 countries have industrial minerals. 11 countries are top producers of almost all metals that are required today for energy transitions. You know what energy transition is? The world is moving away from using hydrocarbons and oil and gas into more efficient, sustainable, renewable energies. And that tells us there's a certain migration that we are calling today energy transition. And that energy transition requires significant of the resources found on Africa. So Africa, once again, may be the solution to the world's climate change problem. Africa contributes only 4% to climate change. Only 4%. But the conversations today is that maybe we should hold some of these minerals down so that there's no further climate change, which is the conversation which must be held on a different grounding, because it smacks of unfairness. The developed countries who are really now concerned about climate change, and we are too. I'm sure you know, we've seen tidal waves in Qatar and stuff. Today, the temperatures of the days today, 10 years back, you'd not have those temperatures. They are all effects of climate change. We are the fastest growing population, and we are growing by 2030, 1.7 billion. It's estimated that Africa would have more cities with over 1 million people than anywhere in the world in the next 10 years. We are seeing annual spending in Africa grow, and the consumption spending by then will be 6.7 trillion. And you have to be part of that 6 trillion market. You have to be. You can't let it be a market that is foreign controlled or is not on the continent or not on the country. You must be part of that. So these are just a few things that should trigger your mind that the opportunity to grow is there. What we need today is a resilience to let us overcome the problems that we have. Digitalization is helping us. I mean, how many of you know that at the end of last year, total fintech transactions on the mobile phone in Ghana was $120 billion. $120 billion. But yet, we think that we have the worst economy in the worst of times. The best of times are coming to us, but we can only access it with our resilience. Our resilience and our positivity. Our negativity will not solve our problems. our positivity will. So for the young person here, that's my message to you, that we need to build resilience. And there are so many ways of building resilience as a business person. I've mentioned about the market, the CFTA, and what it is, and what Africa needs to do to access that market. Just being a bit, the inspiration, because he's the current president, and he says that there must be an Africa beyond. There's a bit of an error there. The second statement is not aid is a must, sorry. Africa is ready and Africa is willing, and we all need to be part of it because we are Afrikaners, and it starts from Ghana. Ghana offers you the entry point into that African continent. And I think that we should embrace it, be resilient, be positive. Problems are everywhere. We'll face the problems day in, day out. I remember long ago, my mother said to me one day when I was really upset about something one of my sisters had done. He said, what's your problem? I said, she did this. I said, oh, no. What should worry you is not that there's a problem, because be prepared in your life. Every day, every minute, you face a problem. Your solution to that is how you react to it, because that is where you have a choice. The problems coming, you may not have a choice, but how you react to it, you have a choice. And the choice begins from here right now. Thank you very much.